It has been officially 5 years worth of Genshin Impact, and that's still crazy to say, right? But with 5 years comes a lot of characters and a lot of decisions that you'll have to make on whether to pull one character or another. Since we're 5 years in, and we have now arrived at version Luna 1, I have decided to do another tier list, but with only the 5-star characters, because if I were to go through the entire thing, this would be hell on earth, and I quite frankly don't want to do that again. So for this tier list I will have some concrete criteria to go off of, so let's get into those. Number 1 is their strength, how high their damage goes, their net total damage, and also like how good their buffs and debuffs are, or if they heal, then is the healing good? All of that. If the character is strictly meant to do damage and has no other viable role, then I'm gonna rank them hierarchically. Number 2 is cost of viable build, how easy they are to get up and running, which also includes their weapon options and how many stats you have to invest into them, as well as their best teammates. And lastly is their flexibility, right? How many teams can they fit into and still be pretty good at doing what they do? As a quick disclaimer, just because I know I'm gonna get raked over the coals for it if I don't mention it, but all characters will be judged at a C0R1 basis unless stated otherwise as an honorable mention. Like I said, honorable mention, and that will not be reflected in the actual list itself. For this list, I'm going to be going down the line in terms of what version the characters were released in, so going from oldest to newest. So, without further ado, let's start very easily. Chi-Chi, F tier. I think this is pretty unanimous. I don't need to explain myself, but I will anyways. She only heals. Nothing else. The uptime on the healing is horrible relative to the actual cooldown of it. Even if you do run the sacrificial sword, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. Her cryo application is both weak and slow. It's only like 1 unit every 2.5 seconds or something like that, which is not great. And I think it has regular ICD anyway, so count that as every like 5 seconds, basically, is what it is. She is okay if you're just starting out, but she literally has no place in the end game whatsoever. You are actually just meant to feel bad whenever you lose your 50-50 to this character. Moving on, we have Jean. I'm going to put Jean in B tier. Why? Because she boosts Furina. And I'll get into Furina later on, but just know that Furina's fucking busted, and Jean having the ability to heal party-wide is pretty huge. And she's also Anemo, so she has access to Virtus and Venerer debuff, right? Which is also really good. She has a little bit of grouping, but it's pretty inconsequential. The way you have to set it up is a little annoying, but she does have that ability. And also, hey, she does Sunfire stuff. She's the only character that has the unique property of being able to swirl Pyro onto themselves. D-Look is C tier. He is very weak if you try to play him the way that he was intended to play. I'm talking like his regular normal attack skill, normal attack skill, normal attack skill. That playstyle is so weak because the numbers on that are so low that it's not even worth it. That being said, he can do good stuff with Shen, but that's requiring another 5-star to basically play the way that they were not intended to play, but he has good damage because his scaling is humongous on it, and he also wants very valuable teammates to make him like halfway decent. You want Furina, you want your Bennett's. Those are still two very wanted characters on other teams. Next is Kutsing. I'm also going to put Kutsing B tier. For the record, by the way, these characters are put into the rank and not ranked in order because that would take way too long to explain and also deliberate over, so let's just put them in the tier, and they're in the tier as is. Kutsing. She scales pretty well into Aggravate and Quick Bloom, and Chevra's Overloaded, right? She's one of those that keeps getting buffs. As long as the element itself keeps getting buffs, she will keep getting better. She has relatively cheap teams, right? Aggravate. You want like Nahida, Kazuha, Nahida, like Sucrose even, and maybe like Fischl. You just need element checks, right? Dendro, Electro, and then Anemo. Something with those elements, and then you are pretty much good to go. Next up, Mona. I'm gonna put Mona C tier. Her Hydro application is weak and slow. It is like the Chi-Chi of Hydro in terms of Hydro application, which is not great. But what is good is that she does give up to 50% damage buff when you use her burst and she applies the Omen onto enemies. So she does have the niche use in Skirk or Freeze teams, but she's generally worse than most other Hydros outside of that. And Yelan and Furina just both do her job way better anyways. You know, you lost 50-50 and she's okay, but she's not great. Venti, I'm gonna put D tier. his burst does damn near nothing to modern enemies, right? Because most of them are too fat and heavy that they can't be moved by it and then can't be lifted. So his burst literally does nothing sometimes. If they're not being pulled into it, then it's gonna be doing nothing because it's just gonna be swirling air. Outside of like being able to suck and being able to use Viridescent Venerer again, he literally has nothing else, right? He has no other support ability besides just the raw CC that you get from his burst and the ability to use an artifact set. Moving on to Klee, I'll put C tier. Because she has so much pyro application, can set up teammate reactions. So if you want to do forward vaporize with like a slower hitting hydro character, then you can do that. She can do okay, but you need to put a lot of time into learning how to do her cancels and like walk cancels, jump cancels, and all that other stuff, and that's just not a lot of people's cup of tea. Investing into her is usually not worth the cost. You need to have high value equipment on her for her to actually do stuff, and that's usually not worth it in this day and age when there's just better characters that you can get that just work off of way less. I will say, notable constellation for her, if she was C2, which is the constellation that gives her bombs the Death Shred effect, then I would put her one tier above, just because she still has very good properties for fighting the Lava Dragon statue, which, you know, appears a lot, pretty good at that. And also Death Shred is rare in this game. Death Shred is different from Rush Shred because it factors into the damage formula differently and all that other stuff. I think Klee is good for C tier. Moving into Tartaglia, I think I would still put Tartaglia either A or B, but I'm leaning more towards A because he has infinite potential with his Riptide effects, right? Riptide slashes can be infinite potential for so long as there are multiple enemies. With more enemies comes more Riptides, which means more damage. But even against single target, I think he's still really good anyways, because he has the theoretical fastest hydro application still, because of how like he has 0 ICDs on his Riptide slashes, like how many sources of hydro application he can have that are technically counted as different, but because of that, you essentially just have a cycle of infinite hydro application. I will say though, he is a little hard to play and sometimes because you will need to learn how to get his hydro application working properly so you can get those teams performing the best. But he's scaling really well with these new lunar reactions, right? Lunar Bloom, Lunar Charge. Hey, he's Hydro, and he can take advantage of both of those, which is really good. Generally weaker in single target content, but he's still very good, right? His baseline is still very high relative to everything in the game, to be honest with you, right? It's still very good. Zhongli, I'm going to put B tier. He does still rock the fattest shield in the game, and also 20% resist shred when you're near enemies, right? And that's every resistance, right? Including physical, dendro, animal, all that. With the fattest shield, you also get a very long duration of interruption resist, which is very valuable for a lot of teams like Caesar, Novelette, any charge attack character. If you want to play comfy, Zhongli is usually your guy. The reason why I put him in B tier, even if all of those things sound great, is because he is a damage loss in almost every situation that you can think of, because all he does is bring a shield, which is good for comfy, but not great for maximum damage output. And you're losing time or damage that way. And Zhongli is like a brick. He's a brick in all the senses. He won't break, but he's also just gonna weigh you down so much that it's just usually not worth it. And with all the ramping HP bars that you need a lot of damage for, Zhongli's usually not gonna cut it with his buffs or debuffs. And also his burst is fucking useless a lot of the time, right? Because most of the hard content nowadays are just big bosses and they can't be petrified. So there's literally no point in using his burst. Next, Albedo. God save me, because Albedo's garbage. Albedo's actually garbage. What he brings to the table is very small periodic geo damage, like every 2.5 seconds. You know, like there's Shiori for that, and I'll get into her later as well. But Shiori just does that better. You need his Solar Isotoma to stay on the field for that to happen in the first place, and that thing crumples very easily and quickly a lot of the time. I would know because I picked up Albedo when he came out, and since then, I can't count the number of times my Solar Isotoma has broken up on me to the most random thing, and it's just annoying because once that thing is gone, he has no presence in the team whatsoever. I mean, his burst gives an EM buff, but that doesn't do anything to help him at all, so there's no point in that. Ganyu B tier. Big charge attack that's still pretty damn good, still very good for freeze and melt, and especially because both those reactions got buffs relatively recently, right, with Escoffier or Silali. She is plenty easy to build and play. Hey, if you go Blizzard Share, then that's 40% crit rate that you don't need to account for, basically, so that makes her really easy to build. Or if you're trying to go Melt, Wanders is like in practically every boss drop, so you get that over time. Weapon-wise, she has really good FTP options, right, and then they scale up higher the higher they go. but she generally has a pretty good baseline. The only disadvantage to her is that she's not like completely brain dead easy, because you still need to, if you're rocking her without a shield, which I don't recommend for a lot of people, unless you know your way around the game and all that stuff, you're still sat there charging your arrow, which is kind of like the only downside to Ganyu. In terms of ease of use and all that stuff, yeah, B tier seems fine. Xiao! Yeah, I'll put him C tier. Listen, say what you want about him being actually decent, but to me, he is way too expensive to build, requiring 2 event 5 stars and a C6 Farazan to be viable in this day and age. Look, he's good if you have all that, but he's awful if you're missing any part of it, because hey, what C6 Farazan gives you is quite literally indispensable. Like, his major crutch is C6 Farazan. If you do not have C6 Farazan, he is down in the dumps. If you do, he's like up here. But we're counting C0 or 1 in most general cases. I'm specifically saying because I do not have a C6 Farazan. If you do not have all of those tools, he does not feel good to play, and he does not do enough damage to be worth playing in Luna 1. Especially with him having energy issues if you are missing Farazan on C6. But that's besides the point. Anyways, Hu Tao is B tier. If she were C1, I would put her up in A tier. But this is a C0 list. So, good things about Hu Tao is her damage is still very good. I will say she is like slightly weaker than newer characters, and also more annoying to play if you do not have C1, because like you gotta learn jump cancels, or else you just suffer in not having stamina, and that's not very fun. But besides that, no, like she still does pretty good damage for what she is. Right, very easy to play. All you just need is like a Hydro teammate. Hey, Xingqiu's right there, or Yelan even. So you know what? If you want to play her, she's still fine. Let's also get this out of the way for being very obvious. Yola F tier. Physical sucks. Almost every new enemy has resistance to physical in some form or fashion, so that's whether it be through her family name or as a playable character. She has to work against everything, and that's just not very fun. Like, everything is working against her, and physical sucks. Burst is annoying to hit and doesn't do enough damage to make it worth using her anyways. On top of that, it's hard to get the burst back because she is stupidly ER hungry that it's ridiculous. And you have to do a bunch of funneling stuff to get the burst back reliably, and it's just not very good. Like, she just sucks, right? Low damage, no energy generation, and then just burst is annoying to hit. Moving to the tail end of version 1, we have Kaedehara Kazuha, still S tier. I do strongly believe that he's still S tier, for the reason of he has great CC that is not like Venti's, which he can still pull in bigger enemies, right? It's just not going to lift them as hard. It still pulls enemies in, which is huge. He has a lot of elemental damage, a lot of swirl, a lot of buffing and enemy debuffing. He's very low in vest, because all you want is like a Favonius sword at like bare minimum, or hell, even Iron Sting or whatever. Those EM weapons are fine too, but Favonius is usually preferred because he is decently energy hungry and you don't want to spend a whole lot of time on him, right? And you just full send to the EM. That's all you need to do. He's extremely flexible, works in every Pyro, Electro, Cryo, Hydro team. He's still very, very good. Version 2, Ayaka. Ayaka is A tier. I would put her A tier. Great damage potential, especially with Escoffier. Good at all levels of investment, like even if she is relatively cheap to build anyways. Good ER regen, very good at getting her burst back, which is the core part of why you would want to use her. She has low field time. The bare minimum of what you have to do is do your little dash, do your little normal tech, if you have Mist Splitter, and then rip your burst, and then you're done. The downside is that if she misses her burst, yeah, she does nothing. She actually does nothing. You just sit there and look at the blizzard over there, and then look at the enemy over here, and like, it's really depressing. Next, Yoimiya D tier. She is easy to play, I guess, because all you gotta do is, she's one of those skill and infuse normal attack characters, right? She was the second one to do that. She's horrible in AoE scenarios, because auto-targeting is a bitch in Genshin still, so that's not very fun to do. She has team flexibility, but of course, her being ranked down there means that there's just straight up better options. You already see like 3 Pyro characters ahead of her already as it is. And yeah, not enough damage. She's too weak. She was always a little weak, but it wasn't as clear before as it is now, with HP bars just fucking expanding by like 2-fold or sometimes even 3-fold, and she just doesn't have enough damage to clear. Next, Raiden is B tier. I will say this right now. If she was C tier or 3, I would put her here. C0 belongs here. She has great electro coverage, good for Hyper Bloom, right? As I'm sure a lot of people have been using her for the past 2 years or ever since Dendro came out, right? She is still probably the single best battery character in the game because she works off of energy mechanics, right? Being able to generate energy is like her whole shtick, and she's good. She's got good team flexibility, being able to use it as a hyper carry, hyper bloom, or Chevre's overloaded, right? Very good for all of those things. She gives a team-wide burst damage buff, so that's really good too. She buffs your other characters' elemental bursts damage just passively by using her skill, which is really nice. I will say that she's not quite up there because her base damage at C0 is a little bit low, but no, if she was C2 or 3, I would put her probably A tier minimum, but since it's C0, I'm gonna put her B tier. Next, Kokomi. Kokomi, I'm gonna put C tier. She has good hydro application, a wide range and long-lasting hydro application, which is great for transformative reactions like bloom and stuff like that. A lot of heals, and relatively easy to build, right? You can get her off the ground very quickly because you don't need any crit, you just want ER and HP. Like, those are the only 2 stats that you want to focus on building. She's generally pretty good to go after that. Ito, B tier. Or no, maybe C tier, actually. No, I'll put Ito C tier. He still has decent damage output, and like you can pretty much unga bunga combos and he'll do fine because it's all geo damage anyways, so you don't really need any timing. He is burst reliant to do his damage though, which can be a problem because he can need a decent amount of ER to actually get going, which generally speaking that's not a problem if you have like high energy generation on the team. Generally speaking though, I would not pull for him over a lot of other characters because, hey, unless you really like him, that reason alone just negates this whole tier list. But why are you watching anyways if you only cared about that component, right? But he's not exactly competitive with his damage. Like, it's still fine if you stack it enough, I guess, but in a vacuum, not that great. Shenhe, I would put B tier. She's great for buffing cryo damage and, has decent off-field burst damage, right? Her burst also shreds physical and cryo res. You're buffing cryo, you do more cryo. That's a nice add-on. But she can have absurd energy requirements. It can be very high sometimes, which, I mean, to be fair, you're not really particularly building her for damage at a baseline. You kind of just want to stack attack and stack ER. But the other part of it is that her buffs don't really mean a whole lot unless you have other strong characters to pair her with. Or else, like, what's the point of pulling her, right? You kind of want to buff your characters to be stronger rather than buff someone mediocre into being viable. Still pretty okay, especially now with the Escoffier in the ring. Yamiko, I will put her in B tier as well. She has good single target, good skill range, and she has a big nuke. Generally good for every Dendro reaction and Chevy overloaded, but she does have a long setup time because those 3 skills take a little bit to come out, right? That can take up some of your time. Ayato, I'm going to put D tier. Look, I've tried to justify using him. He's just not worth it. But what I can say is his hydro application is pretty big. Like, it's pretty wide, which is great for like any Dendro reactions, right? Any bloom or hyper bloom. That's how I've basically been using him, just for bloom stuff. Just run a full EM, right? It's pretty easy that way. But then you have to ask yourself, why would anyone want to do that when Nivelite just exists and it's just better most, if not all the time? So, there's no point. To make matters worse for Ayato, his cooldowns feel a little bit awkward because they don't really line up nicely. One's like 12 seconds and the other one's 20 seconds, and then that's just really awkward timing for like team rotations. You're always going to have some sort of downtime on Ayato unless you make up for it somehow by like playing around it, which is not great. Yelan, A tier. Easiest A tier of my life. She does a lot of damage. She does a lot of damage that is purely based on HP percent, which is not great because there's not a whole lot of sources of HP buffing, or if any. But what that also means is that you don't need to have your attack buffers on the same team as her for her to do damage. She can do damage regardless. Not only that, but when you do click her burst, she has great off-field application. You get coordinated attacks that pop off every time you do normal attacks, and it also gives your on-field character a 50% damage buff, or at least up to, because it goes up over time. The only caveat is that she can be super energy hungry. If you do not have a Favonius bow or anything like that, her ER requirements are generally pretty high. Alrighty then, Tiknori, C tier. See, he's weird in that he is very quick, but almost to the point that he's too quick, and that you run into some weird awkward downtime where you literally are doing nothing for 2 straight seconds. If you do too fast versus if you don't, then it's just like you're losing damage. Either way, you're losing damage because you're stuck there either doing nothing or being slow. So I don't really like that part of him. I mean, to get him up and running it's very easy. Right? His teams are generally low cost, but even then, his damage is very low for most content. So it's not as if like he's a primary factor, anyways, unless you have him high constellation, and he literally has no off-field presence as a Dendro character. So that's not great either. Like doing nothing off-field as a Dendro character is not great, because the whole point is just to set up reactions that are happening on the field via the other elements, right? And then Dendro can sort of play off of that, but he literally does nothing. Sino, D tier. Look, his damage, not there. His energy requirements, too high. His teammates, you need way too many characters to make him work, and characters that are in very high contention to make him work. But he's not as bad as the 3 in F tier, which is why I'm putting him in D tier. Nilou. Hey, Nilou just got a resurgence, and I'm putting her in A tier. She facilitates Pure Bloom. Pure Bloom is pretty dog shit if you do not have Nilou. Nilou makes those Dendro cores blow up for way bigger numbers, and she has Lunar Bloom now with Llama and any newer character that comes after. I mean, in terms of how easy she is to build, she's very easy to build. Incredibly easy. Just stack HP, ER, maybe a little bit of EM, and then she's great. She does buff Pure Bloom by a lot, but that's all she can do. Outside of that, she is not great. She is not good outside of Pure Bloom, but if you're playing Pure Bloom, she's cracked. Nahida. Before Luna 1, I would honestly put Nahida in S tier, but at the same time, Dendro has been phasing out a little bit, and with that, also Nahida, because she was basically the center point of every Dendro team leading up to Luna 1. I would say that she is still the baseline for Dendro going into Luna 1, but not as OP as she used to be because of the content that was around her. You know, her skill marks enemies, and then it does passive Dendro damage over time if you hit them with reactions. She is extremely free-to-play friendly. That's what I'm saying, right? It's just like she was the center point of Dendro and what sold Dendro to a lot of people. Or if not to a lot of people, then she sold it to me. The other thing about her is that you can run into a problem where she is too good at applying Dendro that you might not be able to swirl your other elements, like say Electro, right? I've run into several cases with Kazuha where I haven't been able to swirl some Electro because she's way too good at applying Dendro, basically. So that is the one caveat. Wanderer. Wanderer is C tier. Actually, maybe even D tier. I'll put him in C tier. He's like Xiao, but like flexible, but at the same time kind of worse. He can actually use swirl and all that stuff, but at the same time, like, there's other characters for that. If we're just speaking from the angle of just solo damage, he's not there. He is not quite there. And also, if you try to run him without a shield, you're gonna get knocked back like no one's business. You lose damage, you lose sanity, and he's generally not very fun to play unless you have everything that he wants, right? Which also includes C6 flotters on, so there's that. Alhaitham. I'd put Alhaitham in B tier. He has great personal damage. He's not expensive to build at all. Right? You can get him up and running with a gilded set and like an Iron Sting or something like that. You know, and for how wordy his elemental skill is, it's actually not that hard to use. So honestly, if you pay attention to the fact that once you have 3 mirrors and once you dip below it and then just get back up to it, you know, he does most of his damage with his mirrors being maxed out. Once you're done with that, just swap out. But I will say, I don't think he does enough damage to make it as an on-fielder in Luna 1. He's good. I don't think he's that good nowadays, but he's still pretty fine. He's still fine. Dea. Dea is C tier. She has gotten some more value out of Kenichi burning comps. And hey, she has off-field pyro application and interruption resistance, albeit for only 9 seconds, which is like half the duration of her actual skill, but I digress. She's not that great at lower cons, and her burst does pretty much nothing until C6. And also coupled with the fact that she's not, like, her damage mitigation is not exactly sustained. So that's why I'm putting it in C tier. She got a little bit better after Kenichi and like Emily and all that stuff, but generally speaking, not super good. Right, fine, but not super good. Who is super good though is Baizhu. Baizhu is great. He's multifaceted. Man can shield, man can heal, man has passive Dendro application. He can fanfare boost because he can heal, and then he buffs Dendro reactions when he does heal. But he's extremely energy hungry. Right, that's a common theme a lot of the time. Right, characters can be extremely energy hungry. That's just gonna bear repeating a lot of the time. Albeit, his Dendro application is not the most consistent, but it's okay, but he can have a hard time keeping the Deepwood set bonus online. Alright, moving into the big hitters, we have version 4. Let's get into Linny. Linny is A tier. What can I say? He's got easy rotations, he's got fat mono element damage, but he is very greedy. He does want some of the more prominent pirate teammates, like Xiangling, and Bennett. There's not much else to say about Lenny. He's generally pretty good. Alright, to the man that ruined it all, Novelette, S tier. I don't think I need to explain it myself. I mean, I'll do it anyways, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Great baseline damage, super free to play friendly. He works by himself as a one-man team because he does all the damage himself and can heal himself while doing that damage. And he has incredibly good scaling with any high-cost teammates. You throw a Furina, you throw a Kazuha, you throw a Shilonen, you throw an Escoffier at him. He's just gonna do better at what he already does, which is already a lot as it is. Easily S tier. There's no argument to be made. Wriothesley. Wriothesley's B tier. He's good if you've got Escoffier. He is also halfway self-sufficient because his charge attack can heal him, but I wouldn't exactly rely on only that for sustain, but he can do that. Bad things about him are that you can't really use every part of him at C0 unless you specifically play around the restriction of him having to stay above 50% to get the buff from his skill, but also under 60 to get his charge attack, which is actually a fair amount of damage. Like, if he were C1, I think I would still keep him in the same tier, maybe. Or maybe move him up to A tier, because his C1 gives him an additional condition to get a charge attack, which is after 5 normal attacks, so that, like, the whole string comes out, you can charge attack, which is good. Another S tier, Furina. Great universal buffs with full uptime, which amounts to basically a roughly 75% damage buff at max burst talent C0, and you also give a team-wide healing buff. She does great off-field damage on her own by proxy, Hydro application. She enables the 4-set of Marishose Hunter to be used on every character because you drain your team's HP, and Marishose Hunter requires you to have your own HP changes to actually get the crit rate buff. Being Hydro, she's just great, right? Hydro is unparalleled flexibility when it comes to making teams. I would say that the only caveat to using Furina is that you need a strong healer to actually stack her fanfare. Once again, at C0. At C2 plus, like, she just gets it by just draining your team's HP. But at C0, you do need a strong healer to actually max out the buffs or get more out of it. Alright, next up, Navia. Navia's A tier, right? She is great damage still that actively discourages Mono Geo because you need to be able to use Crystallize. You don't need to pull for other Geo characters to make her work, aside from maybe Shilonen, but that's the most of it. She has great teammate flexibility, can basically use almost anyone in game, can basically use almost any off-field attacker. She can run into some awkward rotation time management if you do not do things in a good enough order. It's not too strict, but it can come up if you don't pay attention to it. Shen Yun is a B tier character. She does enable plunge DPS teams, and she also has party-wide healing, which is great for buffing Furina, right? Buffing Furina fanfare, and she can use the Viridescent Venerer set, right? So that's inherent value right there. I will say though that better options do exist without being so much of a gimmick as Shen Yun, but then again, you don't have to use the fact that she buffs any like jumping ability at all. You can just kind of use her as a VV healer, but at the same time, you could just say that there's just better options in general. Next up is Chiori. B tier. Right, all she does is damage. But her and Shilonen can make for a decent, like, flexible combo that can fit into a lot of teams without being all that intrusive. She does pretty good damage to make that worth it. I'd say she's good. Right? All she does is damage. I think B tier is fine. Arlecchino is A tier. Stupid OP personal damage that doesn't have to be specific. Very flexible teams. She's not burst reliant at all unless you would need to heal. She doesn't need her burst to do that damage, but does need it if you need healing because she can't be healed through other sources. Like, only thing about her is that higher levels of damage for her can be expensive to build for, or just pay for, realistically speaking, because Constellations unlock a lot of damage. Her baseline is still very good. Very, very good. But you can unlock a lot of higher damage through Constellations and weapons and all that stuff. But no, she is still very good, even with something like a Jade Spear. Clorant is A tier. Very flexible. You can fit her into several archetypes, like every electric character, right? Quicken, overloaded, Luna charged, whatever. She has self-sustain through however much bond of life you clear is also how much health you get back. She has high mobility because her skill and normal attacks are like dashes, so you have like a lot of mobility options there. Her skill does have a relatively long cooldown when compared to its uptime, but should be fine in a lot of cases. Only thing is that she does not have any inbuilt interruption resistance, which can be a bit annoying with enemies that like to slap you around and all that stuff. Sichuin is D tier. She has big heals. But like Chi-Chi, she basically does nothing. She buffs off-field elemental skill damage. That's such a niche buff, it's not even worth really pulling for, because her Hydro application is also pretty mid. So there's literally no point in pulling for her at all. Emmy Lee, pretty good off-field damage with huge range and basically permanent uptime. You don't need her burst because all her burst does is really refresh the duration of her skill with, you know, her off-field skill damage, which is good, but you don't need exactly to use it. Only problems are, like, she has pretty low Dendro application, so you might lose Dendro Aura on enemies sometimes. But realistically speaking, you're probably using her in like a Kenichi team anyways, so that's usually not a problem. She does require burning, so, you know, with all that, she's good, but she's not one of those characters that I'd probably go out of my way to pull for. Right, she's good if you have her, but I wouldn't exactly say that she's a high priority pull for anyone, even if you do have Kenichi. Which I guess, speaking of, in like very shortly. Now we're moving on to 5.0, and I'm gonna be real with you, these characters belong in the same category roughly because they kind of just do the same thing, which is damage. It's different ways of doing damage. It is still just doing damage. So Mulaney, Kenichi, Shaska, Vareza, they all just do damage, and it's pretty damn good. At that point, it just comes down to what your account needs, or what you want, or element checks and all that stuff. But they're all relatively the same. I guess getting back on track, Shilonen. Shilonen, I'm going to put S tier. Shilonen is easily S tier. She's like a Kazuha, but different in the fact that instead of CC, she offers healing. And also, the buffs and debuffs follow you around, and you don't have to keep applying it on enemies, because it's like Zhongli's shield in that enemies around you will just get debuffed, instead of having to do Kazuha's whole like re-swirling stuff, which is way nicer. She basically buffs every form of damage besides Animo or Dendro, which is to say, a lot of characters benefit from Shilonen. And then the healing she does is good for Furina. A lot of good value, basically. Next, Moeka, I'm going to put also in S tier. There's a lot of points to be made for Moeka, right? You can play her as a main or sub damage, or as just a straight up support, right? She has fat scaling as the main damage dealer. She's got easy off-field pyro application without absurd energy requirements. You know, her attacks have a wide range. She gives your team a damage buff from using burst and the scroll set if you choose to go that route. But she does require at least one more Nataline's character to reliably use burst, and to achieve max damage, Silali is kind of required for that because of the buffs that she gives that I will get into right after. Yeah, no, generally speaking, Moeka without Silali is like a huge step down. And also, her skill has like very short off-field application, so it's not quite the best thing, but it is something still. It is still something, so that's worth mentioning. Speaking of Silali, let's get into Silali. She is also very S tier. She's got shield duration, like she's got a shield, and that shield lasts pretty long. She can use the scroll set as a Nataline's character, right? But something that is more character specific is that she also has access to a very easy Pyro and Hydro Red Shred via just hitting enemies with her skill or burst. What's more is that her application and her burst actually follows you around. Instead of being stationary, wherever you go, it also goes. So it makes it very easy to set up reactions that involve cryo. Forward melt can be a little bit hard to achieve on when you're using her as the only applicator, but the payoff you get is immensely worth it because it is a lot more damage than you would get with any other cryo applicator. I mean, hey, I say that right, but she only does good stuff for pyro or hydro damage. She's not the most flexible character out there, but she does buff those two by a lot. Alright, getting into the final bit here. Mizuki. D tier. Mizuki is D tier. Very easy to play, but that's it. Because she's horrendous, she is forced to float on field to do her job. Yeah, so, like, you can't use your normal attacks, you can't do anything involving coordinated attacks because you're just forced to float around in your skill. So it's very passive gameplay, I'll be real. You know, even if she is supposed to be a swirl DPS, she's god-awful at that. It's low application and low damage. You don't get really much payoff out of it, I'll be real. Like, her baseline is completely garbage. It's like Dea. They did the Dea thing again, where they made the baseline so horrendous that you kind of just need to wait for more constellations to come in for her to actually start doing respectable things. Even then, not really. It's like the baseline expected of a character 2 years ago, but her baseline is horrible. Okay, I mean, we already went into Varesa. They're all kind of just good for damage. We went through all the big damagers. Let's get into Escoffier. Escoffier is insanely good. Insanely good. Like S tier. She hyper buffs cryo and hydro damage. She has party-wide healing, so great for Furina, but she does force a hydro and cryo hero party to get the most out of her. She gives up to a 55% res shred on both those elements if you only have those elements on your party. That is very huge. It is a little bit restricting. Honestly, with the next character, it's not that hard to do. It's honestly kind of more of these two characters paired together so well that it's ridiculous. Skirk is also easy S tier, right? Very easy S tier. Insane damage output with either style. If you want to go quick swap burst or just on field with normal attacks, you can do either or, and she'll still be incredible. She's got very good free-to-play options in terms of weapons, teammates, and otherwise. I will say though, the only problem with Skirk is that the difference between having a Scofier versus not having a Scofier is pretty big. Not in how you use her per se, but how much damage she can pump out. That's more due to the fact that you're forced to use a Hydro Cryo team. Can't really melt any of Skirk's hits. But hey, Escoffier kind of wants that anyways. Those two kind of work hand in hand, and they do a lot of damage very easily. Getting into Inefa. Inefa I'm going to put A tier just strictly for the fact that it's not, like, there hasn't been enough time to properly judge her, but hey, Lunar Charge is cracked, and she enables it, and also she does shielding. You know, two pretty good things, right? She buffs Taser as a reaction, and she also gives shields, which is nice. Too early to say if she's S tier material though. And finally, for today's list is Llama. Llama's S tier. Right, Lunar Bloom's cracked because it also means any bloom reaction that is caused when you're running her in Bloom, Burgeon, or Hyper Bloom. All three of those can be used, and she's not specifically locked to using pure Bloom like Nilou is, although you very much can do that as well. On top of that, she gives Hydro and Dendro res shred on top of other buffs. You know, hey, she's like a walking Deepwood, and you can still put Deepwood on her if you want to, I guess. Very FTP accessible. Like I said, she is very cheap. She's like Nahida, but better. Basically, Lunar Bloom can make those reactions crit. Huge. That's like Nahida C2, but in a baseline character. I will say though, about the only problem is that her personal damage is not great, but you're running Dendro. Dendro is more of a setup element than anything else for other reactions, for like reactional damage and not just personal damage usually, unless you're Kniech, but that's besides the point. Anyways, that's been my tier list. If you have any problems with it, take it up in the comments down below, and maybe I might read them. I don't know. I'll see about it. Like, raise your pitchforks, and I know you want to raise your pitchforks. That said, there's my tier list, and there's been me, so I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!